They say you never hear the bullet that kills you, but sometimes it's not the gunshot that ends your life. It's a whisper, a single slip of the tongue. When Alessia Valenti stood in the middle of a crowded ballroom and cursed under her breath, she didn't just break etiquette. She signed a contract in blood. Because the man standing behind her wasn't just a billionaire investor. He was the capo of the Chicago outfit, a man who hadn't felt an emotion in a decade, until she swore at him. Get comfortable. Lock your doors. This isn't just a romance. This is a war zone. This is the whisper and the wolf. The champagne in Alessia Valenti's glass had gone warm 20 minutes ago, but she held onto it like a lifeline. The crystal flute was a barrier, a small, fragile shield between her and the sharks circling the grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hilton in Chicago. It was a charity auction, gala for the arts, the invitation had said in embossed gold lettering. To the untrained eye, it was a gathering of Chicago's elite, philanthropists, tech moguls, and old money heirs pretending to care about Renaissance restoration. To Alicia, who had spent the last 5 years appraising art for the struggling Galleria Rossi, it was a room full of liars. She adjusted the strap of her emerald green gown, feeling painfully out of place. She wasn't here to mingle. She was here because her boss, Arturo, was indisposed, passed out drunk, and someone had to verify the provenance of Lot 44 before the bidding started. Lot 44, the Weeping Madonna, supposedly a lost 17th century work by a student of Caravaggio. Alessia navigated the crowd, her eyes fixed on the velvet-roped area where the painting stood on an easel, covered by a silk sheet. She needed to get close. Just a glance at the brushwork, the cracking of the varnish, the craquelure, would tell her if the $500,000 starting bid was a steal or a scam. She slipped past a waiter, her shoulder brushing against a wall of a man. He was tall, impossibly tall, wearing a Brioni tuxedo that fit him with the kind of precision that cost more than her car. She didn't look up. She muttered a polite, "Excuse me," and kept moving. The air around the painting was thinner, colder. A security guard with a thick neck and dead eyes watched the crowd. Alessia feigned interest in her phone, waiting for the guard to turn his head. When a drunken socialite stumbled near the stage, causing a distraction, Alessia moved. She stepped up to the easel. She didn't touch it. That would trigger alarms. But she leaned in, squinting under the harsh gallery lights. Her heart stopped. It wasn't the brushwork. It was the pigment, the blue of the Madonna's robe. In the 17th century, they used lapis lazuli. It had a specific, gritty texture under highlight. This was too smooth. Synthetic ultramarine, invented in 1826. The painting wasn't a masterpiece. It was a forgery. And a lazy one at that. The realization hit her with a wave of nausea. Arturo had already authorized the authenticity papers. If this sold tonight, and the buyer found out, her gallery, her legacy, her life was over. They would be sued into oblivion, or worse, prosecuted for fraud. Panic flared, hot and sharp. She spun around, needing to find the auctioneer, needing to stop this train wreck before it left the station. In her haste, she didn't check her blind spot. She collided hard with a solid chest. The impact jarred her teeth. Her warm champagne sloshed over the rim of the glass, splashing onto the pristine white cuff of the man she had run into. Time seemed to freeze. Alessia looked down at the stain. It was soaking into the white silk shirt, just beneath the sleeve of the black tuxedo jacket. It looked like a gunshot wound, wet and spreading. She looked up. The man was the same one she had brushed past earlier. Up close, he was terrifyingly handsome, with features that looked like they had been carved from granite and then left out in the cold. His hair was dark, swept back, and his eyes were the color of burnt espresso, dark, intense, and utterly unamused. He didn't move. He didn't recoil. He just looked at the stain. Then at her. "Oh, God," Alessia stammered, grabbing a cocktail napkin from a passing tray. "I'm so sorry. I didn't see you. I can pay for the dry cleaning, She reached out to dab the stain, but his hand shot up, catching her wrist. His grip was iron, his fingers cool against her flushed skin. "Don't," he said. His voice was a low baritone, smooth but vibrating with a hidden threat. "You'll only rub it in." Alessia froze. The air around them seemed to drop 10 degrees. People nearby were glancing over, but quickly looking away, as if they knew better than to stare at this man. "I really am sorry," she tried again, her voice trembling. She needed to leave. She needed to fix the painting situation. This was a disaster. He released her wrist slowly, his eyes boring into hers. "Watch where you are walking, signorina." He turned his back on her, dismissing her like she was nothing more than a clumsy waitress. He turned to the man beside him, a shorter, stockier man, with a scar running through his eyebrow. Alessia took a step back, her cheeks burning. She should have just walked away. She should have run to the exit. But the stress of the forgery, the heat of the room, and the utter arrogance of this man snapped something inside her. She turned her head away, looking towards the floor, and let the frustration bleed out in the language of her grandmother. "Che stronzo arrogante," she muttered, the Italian rolling soft and angry off her tongue. What an arrogant asshole. It was barely a whisper, a breath. It should have been swallowed by the chatter of the gala and the string quartet playing Vivaldi, but the man stopped. The man in the Brioni suit froze mid-step. His shoulders stiffened. Slowly, deliberately, he turned back around. The crowd seemed to part as he took one step toward her, then another. He towered over her, blocking out the light from the chandeliers. The smell of him, expensive leather, tobacco, and something sharp like gun oil, filled her senses. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. The menace radiating off him was palpable, choking. "Say that one more time," he commanded. It wasn't a question. Alessia's breath hitched. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked into his dark eyes and saw something dangerous flickering there. Not anger, curiosity, and recognition. She started, her voice failing. "You called me an arrogant asshole," he said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly intimate register. He spoke flawless English, but the cadence, the rhythm was undeniable. He understood. "I didn't think you spoke Italian," she whispered, her defiance crumbling into fear. "I speak many things," he murmured. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. "But in Chicago, usually only my enemies curse at me in my father's tongue." He stepped closer, invading her personal space until the buttons of his vest brushed against the silk of her dress. "Who are you?" he asked. "Alessia," she breathed. "Alessia Valenti." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Valenti, the appraiser." Alessia blinked. "How do you know my name?" "Because," he said, straightening up and buttoning his jacket, hiding the stain she had made. "I'm the one buying lot 44, and I have a feeling you were rushing to tell someone that I'm about to spend $500,000 on a fake." Alessia's blood ran cold. "Come with me, Alessia," he said, offering his arm. It looked like a polite gesture, but she knew an order when she heard one. "We have business to discuss, and I prefer not to do it while wearing wine." She hesitated. She looked at the security guard, at the exit. "Don't even think about running," he whispered, leaning in one last time. "I have men at every door. You curse at Domenico Moretti, you stay for the conversation." Domenico Moretti. The name hit her like a physical blow, the head of the Moretti crime family. The man the papers called the Prince of Chicago. The man the FBI had been trying to pin down for a decade. She had just spilled cheap champagne on the most dangerous man in the city. And then she had insulted him. Trembling, she placed her hand on his forearm. The muscle underneath was rock hard. "Smart girl," Domenico said, leading her away from the light and into the shadows of the hotel corridor. The elevator ride up to the penthouse suite was silent, save for the hum of the machinery and the frantic pounding of Alessia's heart. Domenico Moretti stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring straight ahead at the brass doors. He didn't look at her, but his presence filled the small box, suffocating and heavy. Beside him stood the scarred man, whose name Alessia would soon learn was Giovanni. He watched her reflection in the polished metal doors, his hand hovering near the inside of his jacket. She knew what was there. A gun. When the doors slid open, they didn't reveal a hotel room. They revealed a command center. The penthouse of the Palmer house had been stripped of its typical luxury. In its place were servers humming in the corner, maps of the Chicago dockyards spread across a mahogany table, and 3 other men in shirt sleeves who stopped talking the moment Domenico walked in. "Clear the room," Domenico said. His voice was calm, but the men scattered like roaches when the lights turned on. Giovanni stayed, closing the heavy double doors behind them and locking them with a decisive click. Domenico walked to a wet bar and poured himself a glass of amber liquid. He didn't offer her any. He took a sip, grimaced, and finally turned to face her. He took off his ruined jacket and tossed it onto a leather chair. "So," he began, loosening his tie, "you are the eyes of Galleria Rossi." "I work there," Alessia said, trying to keep her voice steady. She crossed her arms, a defensive instinct. "I'm a junior restorationist." "You are the only one with a brain in that rotting building," Domenico corrected. He walked around the table, his eyes tracking her every movement. "Your boss, Arturo, is a gambler. He owes money to the wrong people. Specifically, he owes money to the Vieira family." Alessia stiffened. The Vieira family, the Moretti's rivals, the butchers of the South Side. "Arturo, certified lot 44, Domenico continued. "He knows it is a fake. The Vieira family planted it. They want me to buy it. They want me to display it. And then they expose it," Alessia finished, the pieces clicking together. "They humiliate you publicly. They prove you don't know quality. In your world, that looks like weakness." Domenico stopped pacing. He looked at her with a newfound respect, or perhaps amusement. "Precisely. In my world, reputation is currency. If I spend a fortune on a child's finger painting, I look like a fool, and fools get eaten. So don't buy it," Alessia said, her hands shaking. "I just saved you $500,000. You should be thanking me, not kidnapping me." Domenico laughed. It was a dark, dry sound. "Kidnapping is such an ugly word, Tesoro. Think of this as protective custody. Protection from what? From what comes next," he said. He walked over to her, stopping just inches away. The intimidation tactic again. It was working. "I am going to buy that painting, Alessia." "What? Why?" "Because if I don't, the Vieiras will know I'm onto them. I need them to think they have won. I need them to think I am the arrogant fool you accused me of being." He reached out and tucked a loose strand of dark hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her jawline. His skin was rough, calloused, the hands of a man who did his own dirty work. "But," he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, "I cannot have the world thinking I am blind. I need an expert. Someone to discover the forgery after I buy it. Someone to trace it back to the Vieiras publicly. Someone credible." Alessia pulled back from his touch. "No, I won't be a pawn in your war. If I expose the Vieiras, they will kill me. And if you walk out that door," Domenico said, his face hardening into stone, "Arturo dies tonight. His debts are called in, and since you are the co-signer on the gallery's insurance policies, you go down for the fraud he committed." Alessia felt the blood drain from her face. "You checked my background." "I check everything," he said. "I know about your student loans, Alessia. I know about your sister, Sophia, at the Juilliard School in New York. Expensive tuition. I know you send her half your paycheck every month." The mention of Sophia made Alessia's vision blur with rage. "Keep her out of this." "Then say yes," Domenico said softly. "You work for me now. You will be my personal curator. You will live in my estate. You will catalogue my collection, and when the time is right, you will expose the Vieira forgery." "And in return?" she asked, her voice brittle. "In return," Domenico said, stepping back and spreading his hands, "I pay off Arturo's debt. Your sister's tuition is paid in full for the next 3 years. And you—" He paused, his dark eyes sweeping over her body in a way that made her skin prickle with heat, despite the fear. "You get to survive." Alessia looked at the locked doors. She looked at Giovanni, who was cleaning his fingernails with a switchblade. She looked at Domenico Moretti, the wolf in the high-rise. She had no choice, but she wasn't going to make it easy for him. She lifted her chin. "If I do this, I have conditions." Domenico raised an eyebrow. "Conditions? You are in no position to bargain, little mouse." "I am not a mouse," she snapped. "And my condition is simple. You don't touch me. You don't speak to me unless it is about art. And I want my own lock on my bedroom door." Domenico stared at her for a long, silent minute. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Then the corner of his mouth twitched. A smirk, a real, genuine smirk. "Done," he said. "Giovanni, get the car. Alessia is coming home with us." He walked past her towards the door, but as he did, he leaned close to her ear one last time. "But be warned, Alessia," he whispered. "You may have a lock on your door. But in my house, there are no secrets, and eventually, you might just forget to lock it." Alessia shivered as he walked away. She had just cursed at the devil, and instead of dragging her to hell, he had invited her in for dinner. As she followed him to the elevator, she realized her life as she knew it was over. The gallery, the quiet nights, the safety of the past. It was all gone. She was property of the Moretti crime family now. The drive from the Loop to Lake Forest took 45 minutes, most of it spent in a silence so thick it felt like a physical weight. The armored SUV, a black Cadillac Escalade that looked indistinguishable from a politician's transport, cut through the night along Lakeshore Drive. To the right, Lake Michigan was a void of black ink. To the left, the city skyline receded, a glittering monument to the civilization Alessia was leaving behind. Domenico sat next to her in the back seat, reading documents on a tablet. He didn't look up, didn't speak, and didn't acknowledge the fact that Alessia was gripping the door handle so hard her knuckles were white, but the space between them crackled. Every time the car turned, her knee brushed against his thigh, and she would flinch away as if burned. He, notably, never moved an inch. They arrived at the estate just past midnight. It wasn't a house, it was a fortress disguised as a French chateau. High limestone walls topped with iron spikes and discreet cameras ringed the perimeter. The iron gates swung open silently, admitting them into a long, winding driveway lined with ancient oaks that cast skeletal shadows across the hood of the car. "Welcome to Villa Ombra," Domenico said, finally locking his tablet and sliding it into his jacket pocket. "Shadow Villa," Alessia translated, her voice barely a whisper. "Fitting." "I thought so." When the car stopped, Giovanni opened the door. The air here smelled different than the city, cleaner, sharper, smelling of pine and damp earth. Alessia stepped out, her heels clicking on the cobblestones. The house loomed over them, dark windows staring like empty eyes, save for the warm amber glow of the portico. "Giovanni will show you to your quarters," Domenico said, adjusting his cuffs. "Dinner is at 8 sharp every evening. Breakfast is at 7. Do not be late. I detest tardiness." "I'm not hungry," Alessia said, finding a shred of her earlier courage. Domenico stopped at the foot of the massive oak front doors. He turned, his face illuminated by the porch light. The shadows cut his features into sharp relief. The strong jaw, the straight nose, the mouth that looked cruel even in repose. "I didn't ask if you were hungry, Alessia. I told you when we eat." He stepped closer, the heat of his body cutting through the night chill. "You are thin. Too thin. You look like a breeze could knock you over. If you are going to work for me, you need strength. You will eat." He didn't wait for a response. He turned and vanished into the house. Giovanni led her up a grand staircase that could have belonged in the Titanic, down a long corridor lined with tapestries that Alicia noted with a professional pang were 18th century Flemish originals worth more than her entire life's earnings. "Here," Giovanni grunted, opening a heavy wooden door. The room was exquisite. A 4-poster bed, draped in cream silk, a fireplace with logs already crackling, and a balcony that overlooked the dark grounds. And, true to his word, there was a heavy brass bolt on the inside of the door. "Boss says you need anything. You pick up the house phone and dial 0, Giovanni said. "Don't go downstairs past midnight. The dogs are out." "Dogs?" "Cane corsos. They don't like strangers." Giovanni offered a grim smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sleep tight, Miss Valenti." He closed the door. Alessia immediately threw the bolt. Then she dragged a heavy velvet armchair in front of the door, wedging it under the handle. She didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, still in her emerald gala dress, listening to the house breathe. She heard footsteps pace the hallway for an hour, then silence. When dawn broke, bleeding grey light into the room, Alessia washed her face in the marble ensuite bathroom. She had no clothes, but she found a closet filled with boxes, high-end boutiques, Chanel, Prada, Brunello Cucinelli, all her size. The realization made a stomach turn. He hadn't just checked her background. He had prepared for her arrival. This wasn't a spontaneous kidnapping. This was an acquisition. She chose a simple pair of black trousers and a cream silk blouse, refusing to wear anything too revealing. She went downstairs, navigating the silent house. She found the dining room, but it was empty. Following the smell of coffee, she found the kitchen. It was industrial-sized, gleaming with stainless steel. A stout woman with grey hair was kneading dough. "Ah, the signorina," the woman said, not looking up. "Sit, eat." "I'm looking for Mr. Moretti," Alessia said. "The padrone is in the west wing, the library. But he is not to be disturbed." Alessia nodded, grabbed a green apple from a bowl, and immediately headed west. She needed to set boundaries. She needed to know what her job actually entailed so she could do it and get out. She found the double doors of the library slightly ajar. She pushed them open. She stopped dead. It wasn't a library. It was a museum. The walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, yes, but between them hung paintings that shouldn't exist, paintings that were listed in Interpol databases. To her left, a small oil painting of a storm-tossed sea. The Storm on the Sea of Galilee by Rembrandt, stolen from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in 1990. To her right, a Vermeer, The Concert, also stolen in the Gardner heist. Alessia's breath hitched. She walked into the room, entranced, the apple forgotten in her hand. The sheer magnitude of history in this room was suffocating. This was the underworld's vault. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Alessia jumped. Domenico was sitting in a high-backed leather chair in the corner of the room, a book resting on his knee. He was wearing reading glasses, a strangely humanizing accessory, and a charcoal sweater that made him look less like a mob boss and more like a university professor. "You have the Gardner collection," Alessia whispered, staring at the Rembrandt. "The FBI has been looking for these for 35 years. There's a $10 million reward." "Pocket change," Domenico murmured, closing his book. He took off his glasses and stood up. "And I don't have them. I am merely holding them, preserving them." "Do you know what happens to art in federal storage, Alessia? It rots. It sits in climate-controlled basements where no one sees it. Art is meant to be breathed in." "You stole them." "I bought them from the men who stole them, because they were going to cut the canvases out of the frames with box cutters," Domenico said, walking toward her. "I saved them." He stopped in front of her, looking at the apple in her hand. "Is that breakfast?" "I'm not hungry," she repeated, though her stomach rumbled treacherously. "We discussed this." He took the apple from her hand. His fingers brushed her palm. sending a jolt of electricity up her arm. He took a bite of the apple, his eyes never leaving hers, watching her reaction. It was a blatantly carnal act, intimate and dominating. "The auction for Lot 44 is at noon today," he said, chewing slowly. "I have placed a proxy bid. We will win it. The painting will be delivered here by 4 p.m. And then? Then you get to work. You will prepare a dossier proving it is a fake. You will use your scientific tools. I had your lab equipment transferred from the gallery this morning, and you will write a report that destroys the Vieira family's reputation. And if I refuse?" Domenico stepped closer, backing her against the heavy mahogany desk. He placed his hands on the edge of the desk on either side of her hips, trapping her. "You won't refuse," he said softly, "because you love the art. I saw your face when you looked at the Rembrandt. You and I, Alessia, we are the same. We appreciate beauty. We just have different ways of acquiring it. We are nothing alike," she spat, though her heart was pounding so hard she thought he must hear it. "You are a thief and a murderer. I am a curator." Domenico leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. "History is written by the murderers, cara mia. The curators just dust off the statues we leave behind." He pulled back, his eyes dark with a mixture of amusement and something hotter. "Be ready at 4. And Alessia?" "What?" she breathed. "Next time lock the balcony door too. You only locked the hallway. If I were an assassin, you would have been dead 3 times last night." He turned and walked out of the library, leaving her trembling against the desk, surrounded by $1 billion of stolen beauty. The delivery van arrived at 4:15 p.m. It was a nondescript white Sprinter, unmarked. 2 men in blue coveralls carried a large wooden crate into the main foyer of Villa Ombra. Alessia stood at the top of the stairs watching. Domenico stood at the bottom, flanked by Giovanni and 2 other guards she hadn't met yet, twins named Marco and Paolo. The atmosphere was tense, hands hovered near waistbands. "Open it," Domenico commanded. One of the delivery men used a crowbar to pry off the lid of the crate. They pulled away the packing straw and lifted out the painting. The Weeping Madonna. It looked even worse in the daylight. The varnish was too glossy, the craquelure too uniform. It was a sophisticated fake, yes, but to an expert eye, it screamed forgery. "Well?" Domenico looked up at her. "Miss Valenti, your verdict?" Alessia walked down the stairs, trying to project an authority she didn't feel. She approached the painting. She didn't need her tools yet. She just needed to confirm it was the same piece from the gala. "It's the same one," she said. "The pigment is wrong. The canvas weave is machine-spun, not hand-loomed. I can prove it in an hour with the microscope." "Good," Domenico said. He gestured to Giovanni. "Pay the drivers." Giovanni handed the driver a thick envelope. The men nodded and hurried out, eager to leave the oppressive atmosphere of the Moretti estate. "Take it to the lab," Domenico ordered Marco and Paolo. As the twins lifted the painting to move it, something fell from the back of the wooden frame. It hit the marble floor with a wet thud. The room went silent. It wasn't a piece of wood. It was a small plastic bag. Inside was a cell phone, a cheap burner flip phone, and something else, something dark and organic. Domenico moved instantly. He shoved Alessia behind him, his body becoming a human shield. "Don't touch it," he roared at Marco, who had reached down. Giovanni kicked the bag away from the group, drawing his gun and aiming it at the object as if it were a bomb. The phone inside the bag began to ring. The shrill electronic chirp echoed off the high ceilings. Ringtone, ringtone, ringtone. Domenico stared at the bag. He looked at Giovanni. "Clear the room. Take Alessia to the safe room. Now!" "No," Alessia said, stepping out from behind him. Curiosity and a morbid horror drew her eyes to the bag. "What is in there with the phone?" Domenico grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. "I said go!" "It's a finger," Marco whispered, his face pale. "Boss, it's a finger!" Alessia's stomach lurched. She looked closer. It was indeed a human finger, severed at the knuckle, resting against the vibrating phone. And on the finger was a ring. A silver ring with a turquoise stone. Alessia screamed, a raw, guttural sound that tore from her throat. "No, no, no, no!" She lunged towards the bag, but Domenico caught her around the waist, hauling her back. "Alessia, stop!" "That's Sophia's!" she screamed, thrashing in his arms. "That's my sister's ring. She wears it every day. That's her ring." The world tilted on its axis. The Vieira family didn't just want to embarrass Domenico. They knew he had hired an expert. They knew who she was, and they had gone to New York. "Giovanni, answer the phone," Domenico said. His voice had lost all human warmth. It was the voice of a machine. Giovanni picked up the bag carefully, opened the flip phone, and put it on speaker. He held it out. "Moretti," a voice crackled. It was smooth, oily. "Luca Vieira, the underboss." "Luca," Domenico said. He was still holding Alessia, clamping her to his chest so tightly she could barely breathe. But she stopped struggling, paralyzed by the voice on the line. "Did you like the gift, Domenico?" Luca laughed. "We heard you bought our little painting. We thought you might need a helping hand to hang it. Or a finger." "If you touched her," Domenico said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper, "I will peel the skin from your body while you're still awake to scream." "Touched who? The art student?" Luca feigned ignorance. "She's a pretty girl, very talented. We have her here. She's helping us correct our mistakes. We heard you have the older sister. We thought we'd complete the set." Alessia sobbed, her knees giving out. Domenico took her full weight, holding her up. "What do you want, Luca?" "I want the routes," Luca said. "The shipping routes for the new shipment coming in from Naples next week. The guns. Give me the schedule. Give me the routes, and you get the girl back in one piece. Refuse, and we send her back in pieces, starting with the other 9 fingers." "You have 1 hour," Domenico said. 1 hour, Luca agreed. "TikTok, Prince." The line went dead. Silence crashed back into the foyer. Alessia slumped against Domenico, the room spinning. Sophia, her little sister, the musician. She had never hurt a fly. This was her fault. Domenico handed her off to Giovanni, his movements sharp and controlled. He walked over to the painting, the fake Madonna that had started this all. He pulled a knife from his belt, a switchblade with a pearl handle, and slashed the canvas. He tore it open, top to bottom, destroying the face of the Madonna. He turned to Alicia. His eyes were burning with a rage so pure it looked like madness. "Giovanni," he barked, "get the car. Call the crew. Everyone. The Reapers. The Ghosts. Everyone." "Boss?" Giovanni asked, eyes wide. "We're going to give them the routes?" "No," Domenico said. He walked over to Alessia, cupping her face in his blood-stained hands. He had cut himself on the painting frame, or maybe the rage made him bleed. He forced her to look at him. "Alessia, look at me." She looked up, tears blurring her vision. "I promised you protection," he said. "I failed. They touched what was yours to get to me. That is a violation of the old laws." "Please," she begged, grabbing his wrists. "Give them the routes. Give them whatever they want. Just save her." "I cannot give them the routes," Domenico said. "If I do, they will kill her anyway to tie up the loose end. That is how Luca works." "Then what?" she wailed. Domenico leaned his forehead against hers. "We are going to New York, and we are going to burn the Vieira family to the ground." He pulled back, his eyes locking onto hers. "You wanted to know who I am, Alessia. Tonight you will see. I am not a businessman. I am not a collector." He turned to the twins. "Load up the weapons. We are going to war." The Gulfstream G650 didn't feel like a luxury jet. It felt like a flying hearse. At 40,000 feet, the cabin was silent except for the low hum of the engines. There were no flight attendants offering champagne. There was only the crew, Domenico, Giovanni, the twins Marco and Paolo, and 4 other men who had joined them at the private airstrip in Waukegan, men with names like Bishop and Grave, men who didn't exist on any government census. Alessia sat by the window, staring out at the pitch-black sky. She held a glass of water she hadn't touched in 2 hours. Her hand was wrapped in a bandage where she had dug her nails into her own palm so hard she drew blood. Domenico sat across from her. He had changed out of his suit into tactical gear, black cargo pants, a fitted black thermal shirt, and heavy boots. He was cleaning a Sig Sauer P320, the rhythmic click-clack of the slide, the only sound in the cabin. "Stop staring at the dark," Domenico said, not looking up from the weapon. "It stares back." "She plays the violin," Alessia whispered. Her voice was cracked, brittle. "Sophia, since she was 5. If they took her finger, she can't play. Her life is over even if she lives." Domenico set the gun down on the table. The metallic thud made Alessia flinch. "She is alive," he said firmly. "Focus on that. Fingers can be reattached. Nerves can heal. But death is permanent. We are going there to ensure the latter doesn't happen." "You talk about it like it's a transaction," Alessia snapped, turning her gaze to him. Her eyes were red-rimmed but furious. "Like it's just business. This is my sister." "It is business," Domenico said coldly. "Emotional men make mistakes. Mistakes get people killed. If you want to help your sister, put your feelings in a box and lock it. Scream later. Right now, I need you sharp." He slid a folder across the table toward her. "What is this?" "Intelligence on Luca Vieira's New York operations. Read it." "I'm an art curator, Domenico, not a soldier." "You are an analyst," he corrected. "You look at details others miss. You spotted a synthetic pigment in a painting from 10 feet away. I need you to look at these photos of Vieira's known safe houses. Tell me what you see that doesn't fit." Alessia hesitated, then opened the folder. It was filled with grainy surveillance photos. Warehouses in Queens, a meatpacking plant in the Bronx, a high-end apartment in Tribeca. She forced her brain to work, pushing through the panic. She looked at the photos of the Bronx location. A chain-link fence, a sign that said Vieira Imports. "This one," she said, pointing to a photo of a loading dock in the Navy Yard. "Why?" "The windows," Alessia said, squinting. "Look at the condensation. It's high up on the glass. That means the humidity inside is controlled. High humidity." "So?" "You don't humidify a general storage warehouse. You humidify a greenhouse, or an art storage facility, or a place where you are keeping something delicate." Domenico looked at the photo, then at her. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. "Or where you're keeping a hostage, and you don't want them to get sick before you negotiate," he mused. "But Vieira deals in cigars. Cigars need humidity." "Those windows are blocked out with black paint," Alessia noted. "But see the scratch here? A tiny sliver of light. It's blue." "Blue?" "UV light," she said. "If they are growing something, it would be purple or pink. Blue light, that's specific. That's for curing resin. Or drying ink." Domenico grabbed the satellite phone from the table. "Giovanni, reroute the ground team. We're not going to the Bronx. We're going to the Navy Yard." He looked back at Alessia. "You might have just saved us 3 hours, and 3 hours is the difference between life and death." They landed at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey at 2 a.m. 3 black SUVs were waiting on the tarmac, engines running. The air was biting cold, a sharp contrast to the recycled air of the cabin. Domenico grabbed Alessia's arm as they descended the stairs. "Stay close to me. Do not speak to anyone. If shooting starts, you get down and you stay down. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Good." He pulled something from his belt and pressed it into a hand. It was cold and heavy. A knife. A small, fixed-blade tactical knife. "If anyone other than me touches you," he whispered, his breath ghosting over her ear, "you put this in their neck. Don't think. Just do." Alessia gripped the handle, the textured rubber biting into her skin. She nodded. They drove into the city, crossing the George Washington Bridge. The lights of Manhattan sprawled out to their right, a city that never slept, indifferent to the violence about to unfold in its shadows. They didn't go straight to the Navy Yard. They stopped at a dingy 24-hour diner in Queens. "Why are we stopping?" Alessia asked, her pulse racing. "We need confirmation," Domenico said. "Giovanni, bring him in." Giovanni and the twins exited the vehicle and disappeared into the alley behind the diner. Minutes later they returned, dragging a man between them. He was wearing a tracksuit and looked like he had been beaten recently, but not by them. They threw him into the back of the SUV next to Alessia. She scrambled back, pressing herself against the door. "Easy, Principessa," the man wheezed. "I ain't gonna bite." Domenico turned in the front seat. "Hello, Raymond." Raymond Cole, a mid-level fence who sold stolen watches and information. "Domenico," Raymond coughed, wiping blood from his lip. "You're far from home. The wind blows cold in New York." "Cut the poetry, Raymond. Luca Vieira." "Where is he?" "Luca, he's a ghost, man. He moves every night." Domenico nodded to Giovanni. Giovanni pressed the muzzle of his gun into Raymond's kneecap. "Wait, wait!" Raymond squealed. "The Navy Yard! You were right! I heard chatter. They moved a package there 6 hours ago. High value. They called it the Violinist." Alessia let out a choked sob. "Who is guarding her?" Domenico asked. 10 guys. Maybe 12. Heavies. Ex-Russian military mostly. Vieira hired contractors because he didn't want his own guys traced to it. "And Luca, he's not there," Raymond said. "He's at the Sapphire Club in Manhattan, celebrating. He thinks he's already won." Domenico looked at Giovanni. "Dump him." They shoved Raymond back out into the alley and sped off. Domenico turned to Alessia. "We have a choice. We can go to the club and take Luca. We can trade him for Sofia." "No," Alessia said immediately. "If you take Luca, his men at the warehouse might panic and kill her. We have to get her first." Domenico nodded, a flicker of approval in his eyes. "Correct. We strike the head only after the body is safe." He keyed his radio. "All units, Navy Yard, Building 42, no mercy. We wipe them out." The Brooklyn Navy Yard was a ghost town of industrial skeletons. Rusting cranes loomed over the waterfront like prehistoric beasts. Building 42 was a massive brick structure, a relic of World War II, sitting right on the water's edge. Domenico's team killed the lights on the SUVs a mile out. They rolled in using night vision goggles. "Alessia," Domenico said as the car stopped, "you stay here. Lock the doors." "No," she said. Her voice was shaking, but her eyes were steady. "She's my sister. I need to see her. I need to know it's her. It's a kill zone, Alessia. I don't care. I'm coming." Domenico looked at her for a long second. He saw something in her face, the same resolve that made her confront him at the gala. "Fine," he said. "Stay behind me. If I move left, you move left. If I stop, you freeze. If I fall, you run." They moved towards the building in a tactical stack. Giovanni took point, silencing the 2 guards at the rear entrance with a suppressed pistol. Foot. 2 bodies hit the concrete. Alessia flinched, nausea rising in her throat, but she swallowed it down. This is survival, she told herself. This is love. They entered the warehouse. It was cavernous, smelling of rust and damp rot. In the center of the vast space, a portable clean room had been set up. A plastic cube illuminated by harsh work lights. Inside the plastic cube, bound to a chair, was a figure. Sofia. She was slumped forward, her dark hair covering her face. Her left hand was bandaged heavily, blood seeping through the white gauze. Alessia's heart shattered. She started to run forward, but Domenico grabbed her vest and yanked her back behind a pillar. Crack! A bullet chipped the concrete right where her head had been a second ago. "Ambush!" Giovanni yelled. The warehouse erupted. Gunfire echoed off the metal walls, a deafening cacophony. Muzzle flashes lit up the dark corners like strobe lights. Domenico returned fire, his movements precise and economic. He wasn't spraying bullets, he was placing them. "Stay down!" he roared at Alessia, pushing her head towards the floor. Alessia curled into a ball, covering her ears. The noise was physical, a pounding pressure in her chest. She saw Marco take a hit to the shoulder, spinning around but staying on his feet. She saw one of the Russian mercenaries fall from a catwalk, crashing onto a stack of pallets. Domenico was moving forward, utilizing the cover of machinery to close the distance to the plastic cube. He was a demon of war, calm amidst the chaos. But there were too many of them. The Russians had the high ground on the catwalks. "Giovanni, the lights!" Domenico shouted into his comms. Seconds later, the warehouse plunged into darkness. The main breaker had been cut. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the green beams of lasers cut through the dust. Domenico's team had night vision. The Russians didn't. The tide turned. The screams of the mercenaries echoed as the invisible predators took them down one by one. Domenico reached the plastic cube. He sliced through the heavy sheeting with a knife and stepped inside. Alessia scrambled after him, ignoring the stray shots still ringing out. "Sophia!" Alessia fell to her knees beside the chair. Sophia groaned, lifting her head. Her face was bruised, her lip split, but her eyes were open. "Alessia?" she croaked. Did you bring the money?" "I brought something better," Alessia sobbed, fumbling with the ropes binding her sister's wrists. Domenico stood guard at the opening of the cube, firing 2 shots into the darkness to suppress a remaining shooter. "We need to move," he yelled. "They're rigging the exits. I smell C4. He holstered his weapon and grabbed Sophia, lifting her effortlessly into his arms as if she weighed nothing. "Run, Alessia, go!" They sprinted towards the rear exit. The air was thick with the smell of cordite and something sweeter, the plastic explosives. They burst out into the cool night air, just as a dull whoomp shook the ground. The back wall of the warehouse blew out, showering the dock with bricks and flaming debris. The shockwave knocked Alessia off her feet. She scraped her palms on the asphalt, the breath knocked out of her. Domenico shielded Sophia with his body, taking the brunt of the dust cloud. Silence returned, save for the crackle of fire and the distant sirens of NYPD approaching. Domenico stood up, checking Sophia. She's stable. Shock. Blood loss. But she's alive. He turned to Alessia, extending a hand to pull her up. His face was streaked with soot and blood, not his own. He looked terrifying. He looked beautiful. Alessia took his hand. He pulled her into him, crushing her against his chest for a brief, frantic second. "You did good," he whispered into her hair. "You did good." He pulled back, his eyes hard again. "But this isn't over. We have the girl. Now I want the man." He looked toward the skyline of Manhattan across the river. "Giovanni," he barked. "Get the medic for the girl. Take her to the safe house in Jersey. Keep her hidden." "And us, boss?" Giovanni asked, reloading his magazine. Domenico looked at Alessia. "You go with your sister." "No," Alessia said. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a cold, hard rage in its wake. She looked at Sophia's bandaged hand. She looked at the burning warehouse. "No," she repeated. "Luca Vieira ordered this. He gave the order to cut her." She looked Domenico in the eye. "I'm coming with you. I want to see him fall." Domenico stared at her. He saw the transformation. The scared curator from the gala was gone. In her place was a woman forged in fire. He nodded slowly. "Then let's go crash a party." It was 3 a.m. when the black Escalade screeched to a halt outside the Sapphire Club in the meatpacking district. The bass from inside thumped against the pavement like a nervous heartbeat. Domenico stepped out. He looked like a nightmare walking. Dust from the warehouse explosion coated his tactical gear like grey snow, and dried blood stained his sleeve. He offered his hand to Alessia. She took it. She had wiped the soot from her face, but her eyes held a terrifying new intensity. Beneath her torn silk blouse, she still wore the tactical vest, and in her pocket was the knife. They didn't wait in line. The bouncer took one look at Domenico's face, the face of a reaper who had just clocked out of hell, and tore the velvet rope aside. They walked in. The club was a sensory assault of strobe lights and techno music, but as Domenico moved through the crowd, a ripple of silence followed him. He didn't push people. They parted like water. They saw the guns holstered at his hips. They saw the blood. They headed straight for the VIP section, a glass-walled platform overlooking the dance floor. Luca Vieira sat there like a king, surrounded by models and a bottle of Armand de Brignac. He looked up, his smile faltering as Domenico stepped past security without breaking stride. The music cut out. The DJ had seen them. In the ringing silence, Domenico's boots on the glass floor sounded like thunder. "Domenico," Luca stammered, standing up. "You look terrible. Rough night?" "I had a pest problem," Domenico said, his voice carrying across the silent club. "I exterminated it." "Is that so?" Luca signaled his bodyguards, but Domenico raised a single hand. "Giovanni." From the shadows of the upper balcony, 4 red laser dots appeared, 2 on Luca's chest, 2 on his head. "Your men are dead, Luca," Domenico said calmly. "The Navy Yard is burning, and the girl is safe." Luca's face went pale. He realized his phone hadn't rung in an hour. This is a misunderstanding. Business is business, Moretti. Take the Jersey territories, take the contracts. "You think I want scraps?" Domenico stepped closer. "You touched my family." "She's not family," Luca yelled, pointing a trembling finger at Alessia. "She's a civilian, an employee." Domenico stopped. He looked at Alessia, then stepped back, giving her the floor. Alessia stepped forward. Her heart wasn't racing anymore. It was beating with a cold, heavy rhythm. "You took her finger," she said, her voice steady, "because she plays the violin. You wanted to destroy the thing she loved most. It was leverage," Luca spat, sweating now. "Nothing personal, sweetheart." Alessia reached into her pocket. The metallic shink of the tactical knife made the crowd gasp. "Domenico told me there are rules," Alessia said, walking until she was inches from him. "An eye for an eye." Luca stumbled back onto the velvet sofa, terrified. "Wait, you're not a killer, girl. Look at you, you're shaking." "I'm not shaking," she whispered. She lunged. It was a strike driven by pure rage. She didn't aim for his chest. She slammed the blade down toward his hand resting on the sofa. The steel buried itself an inch deep into the mahogany wood, missing his fingers by a single millimeter. Luca screamed, clutching his chest, humiliated. Alessia leaned over him. "I am not a butcher like you," she hissed. "I don't take pieces of people. I take everything." She stood up and turned to the stunned crowd, to the phones recording every second. "The Vieira family is finished," she shouted. "Anyone who does business with him answers to us. He is bankrupt. He is alone. And he is done." Domenico walked over, grabbed Luca's phone from his pocket, and dropped it into a champagne bucket. "You heard the lady. Leave." The club emptied in minutes. When they were finally alone in the silence, the adrenaline crashed. Alessia's knees buckled. Domenico caught her. He pulled her into him, his arms wrapping around her like iron bands. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling the scent of smoke and perfume. "You are dangerous," he murmured against her skin. "I learned from the best," she whispered, gripping his vest. "Is it over?" "The war never ends," Domenico said, pulling back to look into her eye. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch impossibly gentle. "But the battle is won, and Sofia is safe." "What happens now?" Alessia asked. "I can't go back to the gallery. Everyone saw me." "No, you can't go back." He took her hand, the one that had held the knife, and kissed her knuckles. "You stay. You stay with me. You finish the catalogue, and you keep me from becoming a monster." Alessia looked at him. "The wolf, the killer, the savior." "And the lock on my bedroom door?" she asked, a faint smile touching her lips. Domenico smirked. It was the same smirk from their first night, but softer now. Genuine. "The lock is still there, Alessia. You can use it whenever you want." He leaned in, his lips hovering inches from hers. "But I'm hoping you won't." Alessia didn't pull away. She closed the gap. When she kissed him, it tasted like champagne and gunpowder. It was a kiss that sealed a contract, not in ink, but in blood. She had cursed at him in a ballroom, and he had threatened to destroy her. Instead, they had burned the world down together. As they walked out into the cool night air, Alicia realized she wasn't the mouse anymore. She was the wolf's wife, and God help anyone who touched what was theirs. And that is how Alicia Valenti went from appraising art to rewriting the rules of the Chicago underworld. They say love conquers all, but in the world of the Mafia, love is just another weapon. You just have to know which end to point at the enemy. This story was inspired by true events of power struggles in the late 90s, though names and locations have been changed to protect the guilty. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of betrayal, romance, and justice, please do me a huge favor. Smash that like button. It helps the algorithm find more story lovers like you. Share this video with a friend who loves a dark romance, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next episode.